gang, welcome back to another video here at Joe Daddy's Garage. This is Brooklyn Pony Part 34. If you're new to the channel, I suggest you go back and look at the other videos in the series dealing with the construction of this 1966 Mustang convertible that sits behind me. For those of you that have been following along, you already know what's going on, and so this will be just a continuation of the series. In my previous video, I showed how I modified the stone guard to fit the fenders and fit the car better so that when everything is painted and aligned, it looks correct. Along with that, there are other videos just prior to this that deal with the fitment of the headlight buckets and what I had to do to modify everything to make those look correct, and along with the extensions. Now, this video is going to be part of a continuation of that set, let's say. Whenever I first started showing the video and talking about putting in the new aftermarket headlight buckets and extensions, I mentioned that I had the hood hinges from the original car, but one of them was bent and I was trying to straighten it out, and the owner had said, hey, let's not do that, let's go ahead and get some new hinges. Well, that's fine, but I know from my experience of using the standard aftermarket style hinges that you run into difficulties, because with the aftermarket hoods not being quite as strong as the original hoods and the way they're assembled, and then sometimes the springs are a little bit too strong on the hinges, you can actually put a dent in your hood or a crease by trying to close it. And there's people that have done different things. They've taken the springs off, they have tried to weaken the springs in different ways, but you still end up with this, this hinge system that's kind of goofy, let's say. In its day, it was perfect. With the original hoods and the construction of them, they were rock solid, and you could really close those hoods no problem. But I know that it is difficult with the new aftermarket stuff. After having a conversation with the owner, and we were talking about what we could do as far as putting in new hinges, we decided that it would be best to use some of the billet aluminum aftermarket style hinges. Now, I will say these hinges are not cheap, but there's a reason for that. There's quality in these hinges that you're just not going to beat. Now, I'm going to open it. I already have the box open, and I'll show you the pieces as I get them out. But this kit is from Mustangs to Fear. And if you remember, I installed the Mustangs to Fear frame rail supports that are underneath the fenders. So you can go back and look at those videos too. But good company, and I'm going to show you what's in this box, and then we'll go from there. I want to point out right off the bat, made in USA. That's going to get a thumbs up. This kit says, or this box says 65 to 66 hood hinges, anodized logo. Alright, so I'm going to start pulling pieces out and just lay them here and give you an idea. And I will point out that the packaging is really good. He's got these little foam pieces that are filling up the box and taking up any gaps. Alright, so this one, I actually cut this loose, but I'm going to set this out here, and I'll put some of these back in the box. And the hardware kit is taped to the bottom of the box. You know what it's like when you try finding your hardware and it's scattered around. Not the case here. Let me get this out of the way. As you can see already, yes, those are basically shocks, or struts, I should say. And it says right on it, nitro prop, strut, and spring. And of course the hardware kit, pretty nice. Have a look at that. That is some engineering right there. Mustangs to Fear logo right on it. I don't know if I can get a reflection to show you that or not. There it is. Mustangs to Fear. So this is all billet aluminum, and man, it is just super nice. The owner had them anodized in black because under the hood everything else will be black, and he didn't want the hinges standing out very much. But man, just super nice. Now, it also came with these. These are spacers to set it inside where it mounts to the inner fender or the apron. So spacers there. And I've already showed you the hardware kit. But man, and like I said, these are not cheap. I'm not sure exactly what the cost is, but for the average person, you're probably not going to look at something like this for the basic driver type car, because it's just not worth it. But if you're building a nice custom car, this is going to be the way to go. So the plan is I'm going to install these and set the hood on and see how things line up, because it's really critical that for me, and you can just see, maybe I can point where the extensions are, where the hood meets those extensions, that it has a nice continuous flow. So I didn't want to build this with the original hinges and then have problems if we decided to do something else. So this is going to be perfect. So let me get those installed and then we'll see what it looks like. Before I install these, I want to show you a few things that I kind of overlooked a little bit. These spacer plates, anodized aluminum, and you can see they've got these holes right here. Hopefully you can see that. Well, I noticed that there's also holes in the hinge itself. There you go, you can see the reflection there. Alright, the reason for that is because when you go to assemble this, you don't want that plate falling out of the out of your space. When you set it up, the hinge in place, and you're chasing that spacer around. So they give you some spring pins. These are just split pins that you tap into the hole, and it holds the spacer plate and aligns everything nice. And also, all this hardware, I'm sure, is stainless steel, but it also has an Allen head. So when you put this on, you're not using the factory style bolts. It has recesses. It has recessed channels here. So you'd have a hard time getting the standard size bolt into those. And when I get to that point, I'll talk more about it. Very nice. Something else that I want to point out. They've really engineered these well. You'll see this, what is basically a turnbuckle right here in the middle, and that is adjustable. And I found that the fitting is about 9mm, will fit that nice. And then the jam nuts on each end are 3/8. And also I talked about the spacers. The spacers are designed so that if the width of your car is off slightly, you can put a spacer on either side and adjust for that. And the idea is you don't want to have the hinges in a bind. Because these are so precise, there's no play in them. So you need to have everything in alignment from front to rear, and I'll show that as I go along, but I just wanted to point that out because some cars, these cars were not super tight on the tolerances, and you could have one apron that's off a little bit one way or the other, and so the spacers are designed to compensate for that. So you want to mock everything up and see how things fit, and then adjust from there. Now I want to point out some things with these hinges, at least from my initial observation. As you may have seen in my little video sequence, I struggled with making them move around, and that has me concerned a little bit. The reason I'm concerned is if you look at the top of the hinge, it looks like it's angled up at the front, and I don't understand why it's doing that. These panels that I'm using, these are the one-piece Dynacorn aprons, so there's not much I can do. Well, there's really nothing I can do to manipulate those. But as I was looking at this, the tolerance is so tight on these that I can move it up and down, but I can't really tilt. And so that's, you may have seen, or I tried to show that I removed the washers that were on this because I wanted just even a little bit of play. And the concern is if I can't tilt this, I don't know how I'm going to make these work without doing some serious modification. So I'm going to remove the last, I think I have one more washer in here, yeah, and take that out. And just put the bolt back in. And see if that does anything. That gives a little bit of play, but not much. Now the other concern is, okay, I have this all the way up. This is as far down as it's going to collapse. It is now making contact with the block assembly. If you can see, I have a little bit of clearance yet on the cowl, but not much. It's really tight. So if I try to go down, it's going to hit on the cowl. So I have to be concerned with that, and hopefully I can have these all the way up, and this adjustment will be enough that I can get the hood to close. Alright, so here is where some good instruction will help out. As you can see, I put on the old hinge for the car. You can also see that this angle is more consistent with the angle for the hood, and there's plenty of adjustment. You loosen up the bolts and you can move this all around. Now I want to point this out because whenever I'm looking at the Mustangs to Fear hinges, I can't think of them as the generic style that came with the car. I have to think of them as a more precise fabricated piece, and I'm going to show you what it needs to happen to make these Mustangs to Fear hinges fit. So I'm going to get this out of the way, put the other one back in place, and then I want to show you something. Alright, so this is important. I will point out that there were no instructions in this box. So that's going to have to get addressed, I think, and maybe it just got missed, I don't know, but there were no instructions. So part of what I'm doing here is showing you what needs to happen, and hopefully this can be addressed at some point. But remember, I talked about the turnbuckle. This is why it's so important. And it really has a lot more to do with just getting the hinges set up on a car, I guess, let's say, than the overall idea of adjusting the pitch of the hood. So if I take this turnbuckle and I start turning it, you can see the angle is going to change on this flat portion of the hinge where the hood mounts. See that? Now it's coming up in the back. Look at that. That's a lot closer to the angle I need. The advantage now is I have a lot more clearance in the back. I can loosen the mount bolts and move this up and down. So just understand that there's a lot more involved than just bolting these on. I point out that these are a precise set of hinges. So you have to think in that mindset, precise adjustments to make them work. They're not just going to bolt on and be ready to go. They ship them with the turnbuckle turned fully tight, which lowers the back half of the hinge. So I'm much happier now that I see how this works, and I'm going to see about getting this hood mounted up. Another thing I want to point out, which I think is really cool, is on these little struts, instead of having the standard style, press-on little clip that slips on the collar and is kind of funky, this has, see if I can show it to you, it's kind of hard to see in the colors, but it's got a little spring that allows you to rotate this clip around and pull this pin. So you can easily take these off and on. The idea is you slip this onto the ball of the mount, and then you slip the rod end, or the pivot point, let's say, back into this hole. Hopefully you can see this okay. And then this thing will rotate and snap on. So you can take these on and off without having to force anything and scar up the hinges. That's pretty cool. Okay, so I want to point out a couple of things. One, make sure you have a magnetic holder for your Allen head. As you can see, I dropped this one a couple times. I'm just using a socket and I dropped it. Anyway, if you look at the hinges, see that there's a gap right now underneath this one. And this one is snug. No gap. This is where that turnbuckle comes into play, because I can adjust that and tighten that up. Ideally, if I do a measurement, let's say from the top of the hood down to the fender, then I know if the hood is tweaked or out of shape as far as that goes, and I can make adjustments from there. But at this point, I think it looks pretty good. Now, obviously, I haven't tried to close it yet, and I did have these blankets in here just to try to keep the corners from hitting anything. So just a little tip for you, if you're looking at doing it by yourself, get something to hold the corners in place. Now, obviously there's going to be a lot more adjustment that I need to do, but I think at this point I just need to start with getting that hinge at the same angle as that hinge. Well, I'm at a bit of a stopping point, and not by choice. I was adjusting the hood, everything was going really smooth, I was getting close to having it exactly where I wanted it, and I ran into an issue. Remember, I was talking about adjusting the turnbuckle on this side to match the pitch of the hood or the angle, and I did that, but unfortunately I had a failure. Now, I like to point out stuff because, just as a warning or as a caution, let's say, to when you're operating or doing this sort of thing. This centerpiece is aluminum, and obviously the end pieces with the swivels are steel. And so what happened was, and I didn't feel like I had this out or in or out too far, let's say, but I guess the threads may have had some problems, and you can see it pulled the threads right out of the turnbuckle. So that's going to put me at a stop, because I cannot do anything. I can't close the hood without having that in place. That is a critical piece. As you can see over here, where it mounts, and I can't do anything. If I try to move the hood at all, it just kind of moves the front section. This side it'll function like it's supposed to, but it just moves the front section, and that's obviously not going to help. Now, I will say, beyond that, these hinges are awesome, because in just closing that hood, I could just gently bring it down, and it almost, even coming up, it was just very smooth and fluid. So I know this is going to work great, but I can't do anything else at this point, so I'm going to have to stop until I can get that turnbuckle replaced. Alright, I think I have it figured out. I had a conversation with the owner, and he pointed out something that I kind of overlooked. With these turnbuckles, they're very limited as far as length. The center section is only 3/4 of an inch, and so you're very limited on how much thread space you really have. Now, this turnbuckle is the one that was on the passenger side. So what I did is I swapped them, and the driver's side one was a lot deeper, let's say, in the center section. The threads were turned in a lot further. So I did some adjustments. I managed to get that hinge to go a little bit higher, and with that I was able to shorten up the turnbuckle in the center section there as well. So now it's consistent, and I think everything is going to work out. And I'm going to show you, well, I'll show you just how easy it is to close this hood. Really can't beat that. I do have a consistent line or gap on each side, and I will point out that with these style of hinges, the tolerance is so tight you really don't have much room to move left and right.
I talked earlier about the shims that come with the hinges, and it's a 1/4 inch variance, and that's more about getting it to fit the width of the car and the width of the hood at the same time. In my case, I have both of the shims in place, so taking one out won't make any difference. It's still going to have to be where it's at, so I have to leave the shims in there. And what I'm getting to is the fact that you can't really move the hood very much left and right within the hinges. So the bolts within the slot are, I mean, there's, I wouldn't even say there's a 1/16 of an inch, maybe a 32nd. It's pretty snug. And with the factory style hinges, you can actually open the hood and push on the hood and kind of get everything to flex over, and maybe it works out. I've seen it done, I've done it, but with these hinges, that's not really an option. So everything's got to be nice and consistent and square, and you can look here at the gap in the back, consistent all the way across, so that looks good. And I will point out, I do have some issues with the way the hood hits the extensions, and that's not uncommon. These hoods, for whatever reason, these always have been a problem, and I'm going to address that in another video, and some other things that I want to talk about with the hood when I get to that point. And same thing on this side. Now you might say, well, just move it forward. Well, you could, but then you end up with what would end up really being, I don't know, enough gap to put my finger in, and I don't like that. That's not going to happen. It's not the way they were meant to be, and everything is pretty consistent here in the front. I mean, it lines up with the extensions, and I have no complaints about that. Again, if I move that hood forward any further to fix this, which is probably close to 3/8 of an inch, it's just going to make a huge gap back here, and that's not going to work. But again, I'll address that in another video. But so far, I'm happy with that.
Well, that's going to be the end of this particular video. As I said before, I'm going to do some more work on the hood, and I'll make another video on that. I want to address some things and show you some tips you may find useful for the final fitment of this hood. These are a little bit different than the factory style hood, and I'm just going to show you some things that I do to make it better, at least hopefully better. Again, this is a fantastic setup. These hinges, well engineered, well designed. Other than maybe an error probably on my part with that turnbuckle, I don't really see any issues. But again, you need to be patient and take your time. Get a couple of buddies to help you out, and realize that it's not going to happen in just 10 minutes or 30 minutes. You're going to have to keep playing with it till you find that happy spot where everything works. Again, nice and easy to open. I would say this opens at least as high as a factory hood. I mean, I'm 5'10", and it's my head height. Plenty of space to get in from the side. Do whatever you need to do. And it closes really nice as well. So I'm going to give Mustangs to Fear hood hinges 2 thumbs up. I will say the difficulty on this, probably an 8 or 9, honestly. It's like I said, it's not going to just pop on and be done. So just know that going in. And you may not. And these hinges are probably not for everybody. But if you're building a super nice car and you want a super nice hinge, this is the way to go. So that's the end of this video. I thank you for watching. I thank you for subscribing. And if you would, throw a thumbs up, leave a comment, like, share, all those things that help this channel grow. And until next time, take care of yourselves. Hey gang, welcome back to, I'll let you know there's 33 other videos prior to this one dealing with this 66 Mustang convertible. and you're gonna like this video. At least I think you will. Those of you that